In hindsight, the signs that I'm queer were obvious. My partner likes to joke that I liked so many stereotypically queer things that it's wild I didn't connect with that side of myself until I was 35. And yes, there were stereotypical signs, but the most glaring evidence that I am queer, I had kissed other women, and I liked it. You can laugh, yeah, laugh. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is that the default, being straight, is strong. It's so strong people defend it like it's their life, like it's their freedom, like they'd rather die in a dry desert of heteronormativity rather than ever dream of a waterfall and its fluidity and all its potential ripples. Soon after I came out as bisexual, one of my oldest friends asked me if I always knew I was bisexual, and the answer to that is complicated. Because on one hand, yes, sure, deep down somewhere I always knew. On the other hand, when you're born in the desert, and everyone tells you it's safer in the desert, and you're pretty comfortable there, you just sort of assume the desert is part of normal life. If you're straight, did you always know you were straight? Did you ever feel the need to announce your heterosexuality to the world? No, probably not, because it's the default. It's what we call heteronormative. That means straight is normal as judged by society. So yeah, it's a little complicated. And I had it a lot better than so many queer people I know whose families abused or abandoned them. My family is accepting, and they were allies as much as they know how to be at that time when I was growing up. And I had asked myself if I might be gay, but I knew I liked men, so I deduced I must be straight. Looking back, I can see that there was probably at least a little fear to know the truth because things weren't as fluid as they are now. And even though my family was more accepting and loving and open-minded than most, I still got this message somehow that being gay was, different. And different isn't always good. I also got the spoken message that being gay would just make your life harder, because of all the bigots out there. And although well-meaning, that message comes with a big misunderstanding about queerness and about the role that allies play. It's backwards to tell someone you're afraid for them to be who they are because of someone else's prejudice. Your job as an ally is to fight that prejudice instead of putting more fear into queer people. But the point that I'm trying to make is that even though my family was more accepting than most people, I still got the message somehow that being gay was bad, or at least lesser than. Because that's the message the entire world sends all the time. And even so, I still couldn't fully understand that until I started existing as a queer person. The gender binary is so strong that even when I questioned my sexuality, I just assumed I had to be straight. There weren't other options, right? I didn't know any bisexual people. Thankfully, we now have a deeper understanding and more appropriate language to talk about the fluidity that is queerness. And the queerness includes both sexuality and gender expression. Okay, if some of you are taken aback by the use of the word queer, never fear. I'm going to come back to you with an explanation. But first, speaking of queerness, enter Charity, my love of 3+ years, and she's also ripple number 1 in this story. Their Tinder profile said, "I'll buy you flowers, I'll bring you flowers," and I just took one look at their profile and knew I really wanted her to bring me flowers. And after years of dating men, I quickly and easily fell in love with Charity, and it only took me one kiss to know that I was, okay, wait, what was I? On our second date, Charity asked me how I identified, and I was all like, oh, well, I just don't personally feel like I really need to put a label on it. And as somebody who was living with this straight privilege, I just didn't take that question seriously. And if you're taking notes, That's the privilege, not having to take it seriously. Charity gently explained that there is a purpose to thinking about how you identify and how and whether you share that with the world. She also gently explained to me that there is a purpose for actually coming out publicly, and that as much as we all wish it were the case, we're not in a place in society where everyone can just be who they are and love who they love without experiencing prejudice or the need for more education or the fight for equality. Charity has walked with me as I've started to think about things that straight people just don't have to think about. Things like representation. I'm ashamed to admit it, but before I had a better understanding of queerness, I sort of assumed that all gay women somehow looked gay, maybe short hair, and it was a total misunderstanding on my part, one that I don't even think I made consciously. It was just sort of in my head. But once I started looking around for queer people that looked like me, I found them. But I had to go to queer spaces to do that. So the point is, it takes effort and intentionality, not only to understand somebody else's culture, but to understand your own privilege. And without that, you might end up where I was, thinking that all gay people look the same, or that there's some sort of short hair prerequisite to being queer. There's not, though, don't worry. Now, even though it didn't matter to most of my inner circle that I am bisexual, I still felt the need to come out publicly on social media, mainly because I had always dated men before and I didn't want people to be confused. People were still confused, and that's okay. But the thing that I took away from that experience most is that people who love and support me and who are allies suddenly found it hitting closer to home. Suddenly, they were a little uncomfortable with such a public declaration of queerness. And so I point that out just to say that it can be uncomfortable and people have to work through that, and there is always a way for allies to improve. When you know better, you do better. I went ahead and made the post, and I got lots of love, thankfully, and I didn't know it at the time, but that post was ripple number 2 in this story. Because with that post, I owned my queer existence, my queer identity. For all those years, I had been living with this straight privilege. The privilege of walking down the street with my boyfriend and holding hands and kissing and not having to get any weird or mean looks. The privilege of not wondering if a colleague or a friend or one of you is going to hear that I have a non-binary partner and somehow start thinking of me differently or treating me differently. The privilege of not knowing that our kids might be bullied just because of who we are. The privilege of not having to have this conversation. The privilege of not realizing that some people use the word pedophile to describe gay people. I didn't know that until I was out, and it broke my mind and my heart. So let me be clear about this. Pedophile and gay are in no way synonymous. That's a really hateful, harmful, hurtful thing to say. And if you think that, then you don't know enough gay people. And what is that idea anyway, that gay people are somehow inherently more sexual? That's just inaccurate. Did you know that the A in LGBTQIA stands for asexual? And somebody who's asexual experiences little or no sexual attraction. On the other hand, straight culture sexualizes children all the time. We normalize asking little girls if they have boyfriends. And what about those onesies that say things like, already a boob man? Those are just a few examples, and if you start looking, you'll see more. Now, I told you I was going to come back to the word queer, so I want to do a quick vocab lesson just to make sure we're all on the same page. First, sex and gender. Gender is a personal identity. It's how you feel inside. Sex is a set of biological attributes. So, when you say things like, I'm having a gender reveal party, you're actually having a genitalia reveal party because you're finding out if it's going to be male or female based on its biological attributes. Okay, next, queer. This word hangs people up a lot. but queer is an umbrella term for anybody who is not heterosexual and cisgender. It used to be a slur, but the community has taken it back much the same way other cultures have reclaimed harmful language. Next, cisgender. You just heard that word in the definition of queer. Cisgender is when your personal identity and your gender correspond to your birth sex. Transgender is when your personal identity and gender do not correspond to your birth sex. Non-binary. Non-binary, there are clues in that word. It means not of the gender binary. Now, I identify as queer because it feels safe, it feels good, it feels accurate, it feels cozy, but I also identify as bisexual and pansexual. Bisexual is a person who is attracted to more than one gender. Pansexual is a person who is attracted to people regardless of gender and sex. So for a pansexual person, it's more about the other person's energy and their soul and not about gender and sex. And before I had a better understanding of queerness, I didn't know that I needed to know these words. And I was wrong. So now I know better, and I try to do better. And since 2001, when I came to Chattanooga, I have seen a lot of Chattanoogans knowing better and doing better. As a business reporter, I got to see lots of, well, not lots, but more openly queer people opening small businesses, and I saw pride flags going up downtown where they hadn't been before. But there were no number of pride flags that could prepare me for the first time I felt fear as a queer person. Charity and I were camping at a neighboring county, and there were signs aligned with outwardly homophobic leaders posted everywhere, and a man with a swastika tattoo was glaring at us, and it just really shook me. And it opened my eyes to another reality that I hadn't realized before, which is there are not a lot of safe places for queer people in Chattanooga. Think about the places that you hang out. What is the vibe there? Did you guys know straight is a vibe? I didn't before, but if something can be queer, then something can be straight. So next time you're hanging out at your favorite Chattanooga hotspot, and there's a white, heterosexual, cisgender man playing an acoustic guitar at an open mic night, ask yourself if you might be surrounded by the default heteronormativity. Spoiler alert, if you can't notice the heteronormativity, you might need to add more queer people or spaces to your life. Now, me and Charity started dreaming of a place that would feel safe to us and the people we love, and we wanted it to be intersectional and full of light and color, and so we decided to launch a business, and that business, Soft Animal, is the ripple number 3 in this story. Soft Animal is a small business aimed at centering marginalized people, including people with disabilities, Black people, and specifically queer people. And we took our inspiration from the poet Mary Oliver and her poem Wild Geese. The line goes, "You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves." And that line speaks to the weight that queer people carry, the weight of knowing that there are still too many people who display homophobic behavior and hide it behind good old family values. If your values include prejudice, I don't really want to be a part of your family. And I would encourage you all to kind of expand the idea of what you think family is. And listen, if you didn't know all this, or if you're starting to kind of rethink some things, don't worry. When we know better, we do better. So now your job, if you're straight, is to go out and talk to other straight people about this. And I do mean that it's a job, because it's a responsibility for anyone who wants less prejudice in the world. Not speaking up because it doesn't affect you is lazy at best and cowardly at worst. It's my greatest hope that this speech will be ripple number 4. It's my greatest hope that the courage it's taken for me to stand up here and share this with all of you will inspire you and motivate you. And may the waterfall ripples carry us all to a more enlightened place where we can all let the soft animals of our bodies love what they love. Thanks.